So today's webinar is another webinar. I do a lot of these, but this webinar actually goes into a lot more detail than webinars that I've done previously about what you need to get a job in a law firm, any stage of your career, but also what's important in terms of remaining in a law firm and, and continuing to grow there. You know, when I talk about working in law firms, which is all I do, I've been doing law firm placements for 25 years. It's all I do. I don't do in-house or other placements because I actually really believe in working in law firms and why it's important. When you work in a law firm, there's a lot of things that people may not understand about why it's such a good career choice. And, some of the main reasons are, you can really have unlimited income. So as you develop as an attorney, your income becomes really in your control. And there are attorneys that went to horrible law schools that are making millions of dollars a year and did poorly there. There are attorneys who went to great law schools, stick with the law firm route, and the same thing are doing very, very well. And you can have a long-term career in a law firm, and you can't do that in really any other practice setting, whether it's government or whether it's in-house or public interest. I mean, there's no limit of how long you can work. So I know plenty of attorneys that I've actually represented that are in their 70s and even people that I've noticed, known practicing well into their 90s. I mean, it's absolutely incredible how long you can do this. And when you are an attorney working in a law firm and you get to the point where you have your own clients and things like that, you're respected. You're respected by your clients. You're respected by other attorneys if you're doing a good job. And you actually have, when you get a law degree, a lot of people do it because they want respect. And you're respected when you work in a law firm. Your clients respect you and the legal market respects you. And so you can have, long-term respect as a practicing attorney. There's also a lot of growth potential because when you're in a law firm, you always have to be kind of on top of latest, laws and things that are happening, ways to do transactions, ways to litigate, ways to become more efficient, learning about cases and different ways of doing things. So you're always growing in a law firm. And most law firms, if you're even practicing with just a few people, everybody there is kind of feeding off each other. One person learns one thing, the other person learns another, they share information. So you're always growing. And growth is actually a very important thing for, human existence. And being considered important by other people is a very important component of your life. And so you can do that in a law firm, and you also feel like you're making a contribution. So you're constantly contributing to your clients and doing things for them and helping them. And the feeling of contribution is also a very important component of being a person. Respect, feeling important, growing, contributing to something. And the other thing too that a lot of people don't understand is that when you're in a law firm, you actually, as you grow and get clients, you have your own business. Like people talk about starting their own businesses and things all the time, and attorneys talk about leaving the practice of the law and starting businesses. But when you're in a law firm, you actually have a business because your clients are paying you for work, and a law firm actually exists not as something where people actually go to work. A law firm exists for partners that have attorneys. And so a law firm will hire associates, they will give you secretarial support, so a law firm is just a platform that you choose to have support you and your clients. And you have the ability to choose other platforms for your work, but that's what lawyers with business do. They just choose a law firm based on the one that's going to support them the most. And that's what law firms are. They're basically things to support attorneys with business. So once you stick with this and once you learn how to get business, and I'm going to talk about all this today, you have your own business. And so everybody wants their own business. And so why not stick with something where, maybe it's 8 or 10 years of working for others or 12 or whatever, but you're developing, skills to have your own business. And it's very rewarding. So, when you have your own business, it's rewarding because you control your income. When you're in a law firm, as you get more senior, you start teaching other people. You teach people what you've learned. You teach associates and you teach other people and your clients. And so you're making a contribution there. And people like teaching and having special knowledge about things. And so you're doing that. You have a lot of potential. If you're a litigator, you can one day, if you want, become a judge, or you can do all these things. You can go into other practice areas if you want, and with your clients, you can do all these things when you're in a law firm. So that's one reason that I promote it. And that's one reason why I'm going to talk to you about this today, because people just don't realize this, and associates don't realize this, and people that come out of law school from top law schools don't realize all these things. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. And then I'm also going to talk to you about things that almost no one knows, like about how to succeed in this environment. And you can always pivot at any point in your career. If you're 25 years old, you can be practicing for literally another 60 years. People live longer now, and they're sharp longer. I mean, look at the president of the United States. I mean, 79 years old. So I mean, you can do this for a long time, and you can have a very long-term career with respect and contribution and teaching and unlimited income. So I'm going to teach you what you need to do that. And this, if you learn this stuff, this could be one of the most, important presentations, or the most important presentation you ever listen to in your entire career, because it can change the direction of your life, and it can enrich your life. Having respect and things, your family looks up to you. Having more income, you can support your family at a level. You can do things and buy the cars and houses that you want. You can, or you don't have to. You can do different types of work where you're just not making a lot of money if that's what you're interested in. But you can do all these things in a law firm that you just can't do if you go in-house. If you go in-house, you're not going to have your own business. If you go in-house, most of those jobs last a couple of years. If you go into the government, I see all these people now every day when I go into BCG, people are sending their resume and are adding their resume, and there's hundreds of them. But the people that are adding their resume now are, there's 50 plus people sending their resume that are losing their jobs in the federal government that made that choice. They went over from large law firms, and now they think they can go back, and they can't. So I'm going to talk about all these things today, and they can certainly go back to different types of law firms, but not anywhere near the level that they would have been had they made those choices. So I'm going to talk about these factors today. This is a live webinar. So that means that at the end of it, we'll take a short break for just like 1 or 2 minutes, and then you can ask any questions you have about this or anything in particular that this brings to mind. I would recommend taking notes, because this stuff is important. And if you take notes, you typically will remember things much better. And that can be helpful. But I'm going to talk about a lot of things today that you may not understand. And if you do understand them, it's going to hopefully give you a much better career. So there are 12 factors, to law firms consider. Some of the first are, the motivation that you have to work there. Ultimately, your ability to generate business. Not everybody needs to generate business. People can work in law firms their entire career without business, but that's something that's important in most law firms. Law firms want you to be manageable and controllable. Even the highest performing partners that have $30 million plus books of business or more, they are manageable and controllable by their law firm. They answer to executive committees. The law firm tells them what clients they can have. The law firm tells them how much they have to charge. Everybody needs to be manageable. And as a matter of fact, if you think that when you advance, you won't be manageable in a law firm, you will be even more manageable. It's not just about the work you do and things and who you respond to. It's all these things that come, into effect. And this is only some of the beginning, and there's, 9 more that I'm going to talk about, but those are some of the more important ones. So I studied this kind of stuff in college, but if you read, and it's a long read, I don't recommend it, but if you read Adam Smith's, or familiar with it, The Wealth of Nations, 1776, he talked about an invisible hand, and where everybody's kind of acting in their self-interest, and people, everyone, groups try to maximize their self-interest, and individuals try to maximize their self-interest. And so everything kind of, comes out of that. And the best regulator, of the economy, socialism typically hasn't worked, communism hasn't worked. But when there's a free market where everybody is motivated by their own self-interest, then things happen in an efficient way. And so, when you're in a law firm, working for a law firm, everything, everyone is acting in their self-interest. So you're acting in your self-interest, trying to get, I don't know, positive reinforcement and grow. The law firm's acting in its self-interest by keeping people around that satisfy its needs, and I'm going to talk to you about those. And so, when you're working for someone, they're basically setting a bar, and they need you to meet their needs, and you need to meet your needs. So this, will really this whole thing about self-interest means, and people don't like to hear this, and I'll just be completely honest with you, though. Everything about self-interest ultimately is based on your professional ability and what you contribute and how the group sees you. It's not based necessarily on race. It's not based on gender or class. Anybody that contributes at a high level and maximizes any group's needs is going to be advanced. And you're valued by the what you bring to the market and not these superficial qualities. So if you do a good job in anything and you're contributing at a higher level than other people that you're working with, this stuff, race, gender, class, doesn't really matter. I mean, it can matter to some extent, and I'm going to talk about how it does matter, but ultimately, your ability to contribute value to the people you're working for, and to contribute more value than others is what it's all about. And I want to just be very clear. There are a lot of people that think in terms of these groups and things discriminated against them, and there certainly is that. But if you're contributing more value than other people, then that's really what's valued. So you can do whatever you want with your resume. You can come up with whatever interview answers that you think work. But the fact that when you are working with anybody, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, can you provide the most value based on what we need? And so this is what law firms are looking at when they're, looking at resumes. And, I can look at any resume and know very, very quickly if that person's marketable and if law firms will interview and hire them, if the person follows my advice, because I know what a resume looks like that someone's going to look at that thinks that they're going to provide value to the employer. It's as simple as that. Anybody that has a resume that looks this way can get jobs. And I am very good at this. I mean, could improve. I mean, I'm always improving, but in general, I can look at a resume, and if that person looks like they're marketable, the company will invest thousands of dollars in helping them because someone's going to hire them. And so the characteristics about whether or not you're benefiting someone and whether or not you're someone that will maximize the law firm's self-interest is what this is all about. So how do you look like that person? What decisions do you make? And anybody can start making these decisions in a proper manner. I don't care if you're 15 years out of law school. Anybody can do this. And so I'm going to talk about those factors today. But just keep in mind the overall factor is, do you maximize the employer's self-interest more than anybody else that they might be talking to or anybody else in the market? So the first thing is your motivation and drive to work in a law firm. So if you don't have that motivation and you're not motivated by some of the reasons that I talked to you about today already, like developing your own business and contributing and working with a variety of clients and things. If you don't have that strong commitment and it's not visible and when you talk to people and on your resume, then you're not going to get hired. So I know so many people that went to the best law schools that did very well that don't have a strong desire to work in a law firm. And then often, this can happen in law school. There are plenty of people that went to top law schools that do on-campus interviewing every year and don't get hired by anybody, even though they're on paper good candidates. No one's going to hire someone that doesn't really want to work there. And if you don't get a position and you're not getting law firm positions, I'm going to tell you today how to find one. Anybody can get one. But the most likely explanation is that you truly don't want to. You don't necessarily want to get a law firm position. This is sort of a Freudian explanation. Like if something's not happening for an extended period of time, you probably don't want it. I mean, if you aren't getting jobs in a law firm, you're probably not studying everything you possibly can about how to do it, like reading things that I write or watching this webinar. You're probably not motivated by some of the reasons that I've told you that working in a law firm is an incredible career decision. You probably look at law firms in a negative way instead of getting yourself excited about it. And if you're unemployed for an extended period of time, it's probably because you actually want to be, because in any city, there are hundreds of law firms that you could send your resume to. There's so many things you can do. And if you're unemployed for an extended period of time, you're probably not sufficiently motivated. And you should be motivated based on a lot of the things that I've talked to you about today. And if you're unemployed and not securing offers, there may be things going on. Like you may have had experiences that damage your ego, and you don't want to go back into a place that damages your ego. Instead of recovering from that, you may not like others giving you instruction and telling you what to do. You may see yourself working in another practice setting for whatever reason, and you want to work in house, or maybe you want to work in government academia, and that's perfectly fine. Like you can do whatever you want to do. You don't have to work in a law firm. I see people all the time that come to me for like career consultations. And I did one that was, someone hired me to do like a 2 hour career consultation on Saturday. And I met with this person, and all over her resume was all of these papers and things. She was getting a PhD, and there was no stability in her background. She was like, "Oh, I want to get a law firm position because I need to make money for all these loans I got." And, listing 50 papers and presentations you've done on your resume and with no focus or anything, there's nothing about a resume like that that shows someone wants to work in a law firm. So no one's going to hire them. Once interviewed, I got an offer, like a soft offer from a firm called Simpson Thatcher in their Los Angeles office. And I met with everyone there, and they said, "Well, we'd just like you to meet this guy that you're going to be working with. His name, Barry Ostrag, is a famous attorney. He's a judge now." But I sat there and talked to him. And then after 45 minutes of talking to him, this was when I was looking for my third law firm job in 3 years. I was unhappy in law firms, and I wasn't happy at the one I was at. I went in and talked to him, and he said, "You interview well, but I can tell, you really don't want to do this. You're not excited enough." And when law firms fire associates, a lot of times at Am Law 100 law firms and so forth, what will happen in the reviews is they'll say, "You're just not hungry enough. Other people are hungry. Like they really, really want to do this, and they're always trying to improve. They're trying to work more hours. They're trying to get better work. They're doing all these things." And so the people that don't have that, law firms can pick up on it very well, just like this famous attorney, picked it up with me. So you have to be excited. Like people go into interviews and they're just not excited. And if you're not excited, people will notice it. And you would want to hire someone that was excited and motivated if you were hiring someone. I mean, think about it. Like if you were interviewing, I don't care. I mean, I like to give the example of a nanny. You were interviewing a nanny to do something, and the nanny was kind of ambivalent about the job, and someone was very excited about taking care of kids and told you all the things they like to do, you would hire that person. If you needed a doctor and you had some serious disease, like say cancer, some sort of cancer, maybe like kidney cancer, like you would want to go to a doctor that did kidney cancer and was very excited about it. And you wouldn't go to and told you that they could help you and all these things they would do. And if there was one you were interviewing that wasn't doing that, you would probably not want to hire them to help you. Same thing with an attorney. If you were accused of some awful criminal offense and it wasn't true, like you would try to hire the best attorney you could afford that was very enthusiastic about helping you and had all these ideas, as opposed to someone that was just kind of nonchalant and non-committal. You would hire the person that was enthusiastic. So are you enthusiastic with whoever you're interviewing with? Because if you're enthusiastic, like they know that they can channel that into good work for their clients. And that's what clients want. So this Barry Ostrager was absolutely right. I didn't have the level of enthusiasm. I knew it. He picked up on it. And if I had truly wanted to work in Simpson Thatcher, I would have come across like with all this energy and engagement. I would have done everything I could to impress him. I would tell him how important the job was to me, how excited I was. And I didn't do that. So when I began recruiting, I went into recruiting because for whatever reason, it clicked with me. I saw what other people were doing wrong, and I knew that I could do it better. And I liked talking to people and finding angles for them that could help them and things. I had a sense of purpose, and I started working like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I worked on holidays. I mean, I resented going to the 4th of July fireworks, and and I was very, very passionate about it. And if someone shows something and they're enthusiastic like that, it shows up in their heart, their enthusiasm, and their actions. And that's just how it works. So went into the right profession, but if I'd stayed in a profession that I wasn't enthusiastic about, there was no reason for me to continue working in a law firm. And I did what I wanted that I was passionate about. And when you're passionate about something, you do better work than others. You learn faster. You provide more value to the economy. People want to hire you and all that sort of thing. And so then that's why this BCG grew. It's because someone had a lot of enthusiasm for it. In politics, the candidate who truly wants something is usually the one that wins. They have more enthusiasm, they have more drive, they stand for something. People pick up on that enthusiasm, what they stand for. And so, it's the same thing with working in a law firm. You have to show passion and believe in something. You have to believe in your practice area. You have to believe in the benefits of sticking with a law firm. You have to be passionate about it. And if you're not passionate about it, then maybe you're in the wrong environment, or maybe that's just not something you should be doing. You have to have a passion, and you have to tell yourself like the reasons that you're doing this and the why it's exciting to you. And that's who gets ahead. And most young attorneys, by the way, the substantial majority of them don't necessarily have that passion. And because they don't have that passion, they don't have good careers. And you can talk yourself into having passion. Like you can watch or, listen to self-improvement people like Anthony Robbins, or read books like Think and Grow Rich. And, Think and Grow Rich is a very interesting book. You can look up it. It's there's no copyright on it or anything because it's so old. You can get it for free, but it talks about persistence and, having goals and reading those goals and, going over them again and again. And, if you have that sort of commitment and passion, you're going to do much better than people that don't. You're going to run over them, and you'll run over them and the people you come up against with if you're a litigator, or you'll run over them, other people in transactions, because you'll do a better job and you'll be enthusiastic. I, talk to attorneys all the time, and I was talking to one yesterday that was a very good attorney. She had like a $500,000 worth of business in Mississippi, which is very good there. And she had the ability to move to other law firms. And she asked me if they have anything in-house. And so she's someone that may not have a long-term career in a law firm. And even with that amount of business, like the reason she was moving was because she wasn't making partner in a law firm. She probably wasn't becoming a partner because she didn't have that level of motivation. Like law firms that are good attract people that have that motivation. And then if people don't have that motivation, they push them out. It's as simple as that. The people that have the motivation rise. And so, if you want a position in a law firm, anybody can get one. Like, this is something that people get discouraged about. They think that the market's close to them. They're only applying to jobs on job sites. They're not applying to firms that maybe not have openings in their practice area. They're not networking enough. They're giving up. They're not doing a job search and they're full time. They're not, applying themselves. And that's what I do for my candidates, is I just go all out and try to help them. But, the people that are motivated will get jobs. Anybody will. I mean, there's no reason that if you have experience in any practice area and you find 500 law firms that may be as prestigious as the one you're at or not as prestigious, and you apply to them, you will get a job. It doesn't matter. Even if you have no experience, you can get a job. Even if you want to be working summer in a law firm, you can get a job. Anybody can get a job. It's absolutely insane to think that you can't get a job when there are literally over 100,000 law firms in the country. If you're admitted to the bar, you can get a job. You can, if you're having a hard time in your state for whatever reason, you can look up the firm, where there's bar reciprocity. I mean, there's just tens of thousands of places that most attorneys can apply to. And recessions are very interesting. Like, when there's recessions, especially like really bad ones, what happens is, firms will let attorneys go, of course, and they will let them go often because of market necessity. Sometimes entire firm will let go everybody in their practice area. I mean, there are things that happen in law firms that can be bad. And what happens to a lot of these attorneys, a high number of them, by the way, is they give up and they leave the law firm profession and they try to do something else, or they don't go to work in a law firm that may not be as prestigious. They don't do an aggressive job search. But some of these people like fight back, and it's absolutely amazing. Like, they will call me, they will try to solicit information from me about what to do. They will go out and schedule like coffees and things with people that they know that might be able to help them. They will apply to as many places as they can. They will redo their resume. They will be very, very persistent, and they will always land on their feet. And they will hit the phones and network. They'll call recruiters. They'll reconnect with colleagues. They'll set up lunch. They'll travel the country and do things. And these people always get jobs. And so I've been through lots of recessions, and I've seen, very talented attorneys like lose their jobs when maybe they shouldn't have, but the law firm just didn't have the work. These attorneys that are like that, and there's always some of them that just pop out, they get other jobs. And these people that I've encountered like that, I don't care if they were like a second year associate or a fifth year associate or seventh years, whatever level they're at, and even partners. But these associates and stuff that I encounter when this happens, I look them up years later and they're always like top partners at good law firms. They may not have gotten jobs in the best law firms, but they're always getting good positions, and they stick with it, and they're motivated and they get things done. And if you're motivated in terms of what you do and you're committed, you're going to succeed. You have to be committed because you're competing against people that are committed. So why would you think that you're going to get good results if you're not committed to what you're doing? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Like, because you're competing against people that are committed. People that are committed are always going to do more, and they're always going to get jobs. And then you're going to be applying. If you're not committed, the people that are committed are going to be, you could do better. And if you're motivated, you're going to eventually bring in business. You're going to bill lots of hours. You're going to help the firm in its reputation. You're going to work in the way that the partners and things you're working for want, or you're going to be a partner and do things and correct. And law firms are going to hire you because, again, law firms are motivated by their self-interest. A law firm will hire people if that person is going to give them the most benefit. And law firms cannot function. Think about it. Law firms can't function without motivated attorneys to survive and thrive. Now, there are law firms that are composed of people that aren't motivated, and they're typically small law firms, and they never grow, and they don't do well, and the attorneys there don't do well. But there are firms like that. But most law firms that are good have people in them that are motivated. They will have partners that are very motivated, and then they will have associates that are very motivated, and the associates that aren't motivated will be pushed out or will leave on their own. So just think about this motivation. Are you motivated? And if you're not that motivated, maybe you don't have a list of reasons you should be motivated. And I gave you a list at the beginning, but having your own business, like growing, teaching, purpose, respect, like all these things. I mean, you can get it working in a law firm if you're committed. So why would you want to go in some position where you don't have the ability to stay employed for a long time? Why would you want to go someplace where you're never going to be able to, learn new things? And why would you go into a business, situation where your income's going to be capped, where you may have long periods of unemployment, where you're not going to be able to support your family at the level you want to? So you have to think about these things. Like, you need to be motivated, understanding like the power of these law firms and that career. The other thing that law firms look at eventually, and you don't always have to be this sort of person. And if you're not, then you're going to be limiting your career. But law firms require their attorneys that are working and their partners to have business. They cannot survive if the partners there don't have any business. So that's the foundation of every law firm. A law firm exists because they need attorneys with business, and attorneys with business support office staff, space, other attorneys. Like, this is the whole goal of being an attorney in a law firm, is to eventually develop business and have the law firm work for you. Law firms work for partners with business. That's a very cool thing. Like, you're basically going to a place and you're choosing it when you have business, the place that's most likely to support you and to give you, the most benefit and help you the most. And that's just how it works. And law firms need attorneys that have business. And law firms can always find senior attorneys without business. They can always find people from, if they're a large firm, that top law schools and stuff. But what's rare are the attorneys that are able to bring in clients and sustain the firm. And if you really want business, you will get it. If you really want to find a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, you will find it. How do you do it? You figure it out. And I have plenty of articles about how to get business and things, but you need to have a mindset that says, I'm going to also get business. I need business to be a successful attorney. And I was able to get business when I was a young attorney with 2 years of experience. Like, I got business. I got business because people that know me in the past, like, knew how incredibly motivated I was and how I would try as hard as I possibly could. And I stayed in touch with people, and then I did a good job for existing clients. They referred me other people. And so by the time I was like a third-year attorney, or had been working in law firms for just 2 years, I had like over $500,000 in business. It wasn't because I even knew what I was doing. I was helping people with contracts and I was a litigator, but I was getting the work. So you will get business and figure it out if you want. And I'm not bragging about getting business. I'm just saying, if you come across to people as incredibly motivated, you will survive. On a basic level, just so you understand, the people have been an organized, people have been not caveman for not a very long period of time. I mean, we're talking about, probably less than 100,000 years. I don't know what the number is. You would know it if you're like a social anthropologist, but everybody is essentially cavemen and cave. There are people these groups that used to be caveman or whatever you want to call it. There used to be a certain size. I don't remember what it was, like less than 60 people or something, but there were people in these human groups for hundreds of thousands of years that went out and hunted animals and brought them back. The best hunters were always the highest status people of these tribes. The people that could hunt the biggest animals and bring in the best, were the best hunters were always the people that were most valued. And then there were people behind the scenes that would cook the animal and handle administrative tasks in the cave or whatever. But that's how it's always worked. And the hunters are always the most valued. And if you look at, I was reading this book about masculinity. It's the people that, are able to lead men and things and be looked up to and all these sorts of things. And so it's still the same way. I mean, if you're the best hunter and you bring in the most business for your law firm, you're going to be the most valued. And that's the most important thing in terms of being a lawyer. The better you do that, the bigger clients you grab. Like, so you could, a caveman could kill a small animal, or they could kill a huge animal. The one that kills a huge animal is going to be more valued than the one that doesn't. So, it's just, that's how cavemen work. You don't have to be a man to bring in business, of course, but without rainmakers and so forth, there's not enough work to sustain the team. Without people that are able to hunt large animals, there might not be enough food. And so if you have business or you have a lot of potential to generate business, and law firms can tell if you do or not, you're going to be the most valued member of your clan. And then a law firm is nothing more than a caveman clan. It's the same thing. It's a group of people coming together to support each other. And when I work with business that law firms, candidates that have substantial books of business, most firms are interested in them. Why wouldn't they be? That these are the most valuable people in the legal market, and that's how the market works. And so, if you are a senior associate and you have all these things like the top law school and so forth, you're not going to get as many firms interested in you if you don't have a business. The people that have business are always going to get more attention, regardless of their credentials. Like, if you went to lousy law school and didn't do well and somehow managed to climb your way up and get into a larger firm and you have big clients, you can work at a big law firm. Anybody can. I know a woman that came out of law school, and for whatever reason, her goal was to get a job at Latham and Watkins as a partner. And so she, ended up moving firms with a recruiter of ours like 3 or 4 times, each time to a larger and larger firm. And she literally was in contact with Latham and Watkins saying, what else do I need to do to be attractive as a partner? What kind of business do I need to get? How much do my clients need to bill and everything? And then after 3 or 4 moves where she kept getting larger and larger clients, they said, well, you're almost there. You got to get another like $750,000 and things. So, people can do this. And, law firms do not care how you get business. You could be related to the CEO, not even a great attorney, but if you bring in business, the firm wants you. Firms hire people all the time whose parents could be like the general counsel of some company or have all this work, and people get business that way. I knew one woman that was at a big firm in Chicago. I think it was Mayer Brown, and she was a senior associate in the process of getting basically told to look for another job. And suddenly she brought in this giant client, this huge like international company, and was sending out millions of dollars a year, and they made her partner. So firms will do all sorts of things, and they'll go out of their way to recruit attorneys that have business. And if you're able to do that, then you will be successful. And this is just, something to think about. Like, I'm not saying that, every attorney needs to have a book of business, because I know plenty of people that are very, very good in a certain practice area, don't have business, and are able to stay employed in large law firms for their entire careers. But it's rare. It's very rare, and it doesn't happen a lot. And so law firms just want people that have business, and that's what the economy, dictates, and those people will be valued. So if you don't have business, you can always generate business. People learn it, they figure it out because they know if they have business, their whole life and career are going to go on a completely different path with more respect, more money, more purpose, more ability to move if they want, if they're unhappy somewhere. It's all very important. So there's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. You need to be someone that can be controlled by others. And it doesn't matter what level you are. But when I talk to partners that have like the most business, they're always saying like, this is what my firm's asking for. This is how much I have to bill. This is how my billing rates. These are the clients I can work with and the ones I can't. And so you have to be manageable. And a young attorney has to be very manageable. You have to follow orders. You have to anticipate things that people want. You can't be overly independent. People have to be manageable. You have to do what other people want, even if you're a partner. Like partners often will move firms because they don't like the rules that the management that the management is requiring. They don't like the billing rates the management's requiring. They don't like the conflicts that the firm has. They don't like whatever. They're not manageable by their existing firm, and so they find one that can. But partners that aren't manageable often bounce around, have issues as well. So if you can't be controlled by whatever group you're in, then that's a problem. And law firms are interested in focusing. They have, they on people that are are able to be manageable, and they can't function if they're not. If a caveman is not manageable and won't do things that the tribe wants, that's very dangerous because the tribe could break up, all sorts of things could happen, and they don't like it. So, it's law firms, people that work in law firms have to care about the group success, and the group success generally needs to take a priority over what they want. Your goals have to correspond with what the group wants. And if you're not manageable, then that's a problem. And that's something that every law firm sees. So there are people that will go into each other's offices and close the door or talk negatively about the firm. And the law firms know who those people are. And so the law firm will push those people out. That's just how law firms work. They can't have people there that aren't following orders and doing things, the way they want. So, I have attorneys. I knew one attorney that lost his job because there was an important thing and he said he needed family time. Sometimes people will do all these projects and things outside of the group for personal reasons. That don't, benefit the group. Sometimes people will say negative things about their law firm. Sometimes, when you're working for a group, the group needs to support you, and group members you have to be someone that does what the group wants. It's just as simple as that. If you're the same way. I mean, if you have a family and there's one person in your family that's not, a child. I mean, it's just people, the people have to do certain things. If a clan member of caveman is supposed to, guard babies during a lion attack and he doesn't or she doesn't, then that's a problem. And if you don't follow orders and do things that the law firm wants, then the law firm will kick you out regardless of what level you are. And, people need to follow what the group wants. And if you resist control of the law firm, they will not like it and they will let you go. People need to function and be controlled in groups. And, there's different levels of control. Sometimes you may not have a lot of control, other times you will, but you have to actually be someone that's willing to sacrifice a lot of your personal wants for the group. People that are resistant to being managed, law firms don't like that, and you wouldn't like that either. And oftentimes those people won't be given work and they'll lose their jobs. And so, people, will, don't want to travel. The group may want them. People will say that the work's not enough, so they won't. The pay isn't enough, so they're not going to work a lot of the hours, and that they will resist. The firm will give them certain types of work, and they will say that the work's beneath them and won't do it. And people will do all sorts of things. People will say, I went to Yale Law School and shouldn't be stuck on document review. People will say it's unethical to staff a case with so many attorneys. I had this guy that I knew very well. He was a friend of mine. And he was a very smart guy. He had gone to Northwestern Law School and been at the top of his class. He'd gotten a very prestigious clerkship and he wanted to do white collar defense. He went to a firm, he got a job in a good firm and went there, and the law firm said, we'll try to give you white collar work. When you get here, we do have a lot of it. And so whatever he got there, and they didn't have any white collar work. And he's refused to do just the litigation work they would give him. So they fired him, and he had a really hard time. He became a contract attorney just because he wouldn't, do what the law firm wanted. So, you have to be doing what's asked. You have to take direction. You have to be controllable. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to eventually get into a situation in your career where you're not as controllable. When you have a business, you can pick up and move to another firm where there might be less control and you can choose what you want, but you have to be controllable. And, it's the same thing in a hospital. Like the hospital has doctors that they need at a certain point in time. They need someone to give surgery in the middle of the night or whatever, and that doctor doesn't do it. That's not controllable. Or if a doctor, when there's a shortage of doctors in the hospital, says, I don't want to work these hours, or I don't want to help these types of patients. I mean, then the hospital will expel them. It's like that, in any type of profession. I've noticed, and I don't like saying this, but it's true. Attorneys who have a lot of experience working in fraternities and sororities, like what a fraternity and sorority does, at least the fraternity that I was in, and a lot of them, is they basically, you show up there and you're independent and you're just kind of have lived your life a certain way, and they suddenly will haze you and break you down and pour water on you and make you, eat dog food and get up in the middle of the night and run, go run 5 miles and things. And they do that because they're trying to break your will and make you someone that it's a part of the group. And that's just what they do. And then you feel pride in being part of the group because you went through all these things. The military does the same thing, at basic training and everything. And most groups, people with these sort of backgrounds often, they do very well in law firms. I don't, and I think it has a lot to do with that. So, people that, anybody that is broken and becomes subservient and a part of the group, that has an evolutionary type of function. And these sort of groups thrive when everybody's sort of on the same page, and law firms operate the same way. So you need to be controlled. You also need to want to be part of a group. So you don't have to be someone that works in a law firm. You can have your own practice and things or whatever, or you can be a contract attorney. I don't know, but you have to want to be part of a group, and that has to be something that you want. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a certain type of person. There are different types of attorneys in law firms that do different things, but all of them are part of a group, and you have to believe that it has to be important of you to be in a group. You have to have sort of that tribal mentality that you want to be part of a group. And, often attorneys, they'll want to be part of a group. I mean, it's very interesting. They want to work in an office. They don't like the lack of being around other people. And that makes them, they just want to be around other people. They're team oriented. And if they need to be around others and you're like that, people gather strength from being around others. They're part of a social group and a social, pod or whatever you want to call it. Good law firms will have people that want to be part of groups, and that's just kind of how it works. And if you want to be part of a group, you're going to behave differently. You're going to look at that group and you're going to see, are these people like me? Do I feel like I could be comfortable there? These people see me, who I am and what kind of person I am. And so people, that are part of groups, if they're good members of the group, if they contribute and stuff, then the law firm will protect them and that group will, function well. So, people that are part of groups, I mean, in primitive times, if you were part of a group, the law firm would feed you, it would give you companionship, it will protect you from danger. And it's the same thing with a law firm. If you are part of a group and you don't have a lot of work, the law firm will hopefully give you work if you're an associate. And so, job interviews are basically seen like, are you someone that wants to be part of our group? And if you don't, then that's a problem. So most people are hardwired to need groups, and they need groups to feel good about themselves. And if they're not part of groups, then that's a problem for a lot of people. And so this is an evolutionary trait that people have, and you have to think about, do you want to be part of a team are not. People that have played sports are often very good in law firms and all those sorts of things. So being part of a group is really essential for you being successful. Now, sometimes people will do things like they'll list some business that they had that they started on their resume, and they'll be very proud of it. And law firms actually avoid those types of people. Why would they hire someone that wants to go do their own thing and be an entrepreneur? Law firms, people that are entrepreneurs will often, prefer to break off from a law firm and, and create their own group. Maybe they start their own law firm and who knows, but entrepreneurs are avoided, and very few entrepreneurs do well inside of law firms. They just, they don't have that desire to be, part of a group in the same way. So law firms want people that want to be part of a group. If you're part of a group, you have mentors, you have people that will protect you by giving you information about things that may be happening in the law firm that affect you negatively or positively. And so group-oriented attorneys grow, and they grow more. If you want to be part of a group, you have a better odds of course, making partner and advancing and having people help you than if you're just out there on your own. Attorneys all the time, like, say they want to work remotely most of the time and things like that. Well, people that do that don't succeed as well as people that, are part of a group. If an attorney is in a branch office of a large law firm, that large law firm will often say to them, I mean, I've seen people in Texas that are expected to spend, 1 week a month in New York City because that's where all the decisions are made. So they want someone that is part of that group. Law firms will often advance people that were summer associates there that came in and understood the ways of the firm and the culture and things, and they consider them more part of a group than people that weren't. So you have to be, to some extent, you have to be able to be around peers. You have to learn from those interactions, and people want people that want to be part of the group, and they will help people more. So again, team athletes, people who are active in organizations and stuff tend to do well. You have to kind of want to be part of a group, and the benefits of being part of a group are profound. Like, people will protect you, people will give you information, people will teach you how to generate business, people will teach you about the mistakes you're making, people will identify you as a person. You'll go out with them for drinks or whatever, and you'll be, you'll bond with them, and they will protect you. And if you're just sitting there remotely on a computer somewhere, you're not part of that. So the law school you went to and your performance there is important to a lot of firms. Law firms like having people that look like they went to selective law schools on their website. They like being around other people that went to top law schools. They like telling their clients that their attorneys went to top law schools and impressing them. Clients, know where you went to law school. Judges know where you went to law school. If it's a really good firm, general counsels know where you went to law school. And even if you graduated at the bottom of your class, it's going to contain, a lot more. At Harvard, for example, people like that, and it gives you credibility, and it's more important earlier in your career, but it has something to do with how law firms will view you. So other law firms judge other law firms, so they judge them by the pedigree of the people that went there. When I was working at this New York law firm, Dewey Ballantyne, which is now out of business, they used to have people, instead of looking things up online, the older attorneys there used to be all these volumes of this book called Martindale Hubbell, and Martindale Hubbell would list the attorneys in different law firms and things and talk about their educational qualifications and awards and stuff. And it was the funniest thing. In the law library, there was a carpet, and the carpet was actually worn. You could see almost like a path, like you would see, like a path, and like, where people, anytime you go like hiking or something, there's always a path through the grass or whatever, and you could see like a path where people had gone back and forth and looked at Martindale Hubbell all the time to look up the attorneys they were working for. Now, this is before the internet. I mean, this a long time ago, and the internet was new, but that was interesting. And then law firms, and will base their internal morale on where people went to law school. There are law firms like in, Minnesota that might be, not in Minneapolis, and they have people that all went to like Yale. I mean, do appellate work. They judge each other based on that. So if law firms have 5 people that went to Yale Law School, they'll think they're a big deal. If law firms have people mainly from top law schools will think they're a big deal. So, this has something to do with getting jobs. It's not important for all law firms, but it's important for law firms that think about it. It has nothing to do with how successful you'll be as an attorney. Absolutely nothing, because what's more important are all the things I've talked about so far, which are your drive and your motivation, and wanting to be part of a group. But law firms will often default to this because they think it's important. There's a really good middle market firm in Los Angeles. I don't want to say their name, but it's very good. It represents mid-sized companies. It's very successful. They're always kind of looking for people that are corporate attorneys, and it's just sad because instead of hiring people that could do well there and doing things that I'm talking about, they always hire people based on the law school they went to. And those people are typically not motivated to work in law firms and things, and they don't work. But law firms often use that, and they want to be around people that are similar to them, that have these shared pedigrees, that went to good law schools. It's no different than certain people in different cultures will marry each other based on their social class. I was talking to someone in India recently, it was Brahmin, and they would only interview or marry someone from that class. People, Jews historically have married within their religion. Other people are married within their race, and so it's just similar in terms of how law firms evaluate a lot of people, and they want to have people with similar pedigrees, and they think that has something to do with success. It doesn't really have anything to do with success, but it's something that a lot of law firms default to, and it doesn't mean you have to work in a law firm like that. Your experience is incredibly important, so law firms are looking at that. People are going to look at what your experience is, and a litigator, they might judge you, what kind of task and things you did, or whatever. It's about quality, and when a law firm looks and interviews people, they're interested in the quality of that experience. So if an Am Law 100 law firm is interviewing people, they typically will hire from other top law firms because they believe that experience is very good. It's similar to what they do. The law firm, will know what other types, what the training was like and the expectations. And so if you're doing work in a law firm, any law firm that hires you is going to say, is this experience, is this good experience or bad experience? One of the reasons it's very difficult for attorneys that are in-house or coming from the government and so forth is there's often no way for the law firm to evaluate what that experience means. They don't. There's so many different companies. The experience there could be, who knows? I mean, what's the training like? Who are the people they're working with? How difficult are the matters? Whereas if you're coming from another top law firm or another law firm, they can often get a good sense of that. Attorneys from major New York City law firms will often, feel that it's very important to hire people from these other law firms because they know that someone coming from one of these law firms is going to expect to do high quality work, a lot of it. And so that experience means something. There's different law firms that are evaluated in different ways based on the competence of their attorneys. So law firm attorneys are very aware of the type of experience you're likely to get at different law firms and what the expectations of that law firm are. So that will signal credibility, and the market will value people coming from firms with a track record of excellence. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get a job in a top law firm if you're not at a top law firm, but typically a law firm is going to look at your experience and the type of work you're doing and whether or not that experience matches what is important to them and the type of expectations they would have in their clients. And law firms want attorneys that have good experience because that experience will translate into good results for their clients. People can always fix their resume to look like they have good experience. A lot of times I was doing this consulting thing on Saturday, and this woman listed that she did crypto, litigation, corporate, employment. It's like, if you have experience in 5 or 6 different practice areas, why would a law firm that, almost every job opening is for someone that has experience in one practice area? They're not interested in you working in a bunch of different things. They want to see some sort of experience that's consistent and that they can channel into clients. Clients hire experts. If you had, again, some serious, maybe you have brain cancer. If you find a neurologist, or what is it? Is it a neurologist, or I don't know what it is, but you find someone that's an expert in brain cancer. They've written all sorts of papers on it. They've worked at the top hospitals or the Mayo Clinic or whatever. And then you have someone else that has done, brain cancer, blood cancer, heart disease. You would hire the person that has really good experience and hopefully from the best hospital doing one thing. And so that's what law firms are looking for. And they want training that translates into doing whatever their clients need. So, law firms will like hiring people from firms that they're familiar with and their expectations. This is something that, you know, law firms, that's important to law firms. And so, how good is the training? How good is your experience? Like, what can to the law firm in terms of your experience? This is another very, very important one. And it's something that you would evaluate too if you were hiring someone. So, law firms want people with stability. If you don't have stability, then that's going to hurt the firm because you're going to leave and that hurts the morale of other attorneys there. They think maybe there's something wrong with our firm. It hurts the clients because you'll be working on behalf of a client and all of a sudden you'll disappear. So it makes the client think there's something wrong. And it looks weak and it's not good. I mean, just think about it from the caveman perspective. If someone is leading all these different, caveman groups, like you're not going to trust them. Like you're never going to really give them a lot of trust because you're going to think that they're going to leave and they're going to betray you. And if you're constantly leaving firms, I mean, when people are leaving firms a lot, like it's not just that they leave, it's that there's all the when they decide they want to leave, then their heart's no longer in it. They're not contributing at a level. They're not being a good part of the group and things. So if you leave a lot, people will. It's much harder, and you're going to have a harder time getting a position in a law firm. So people will say things like, "Oh, the morale's low at the firm." They would be talking at a firm that's been around 150 years, or they'll say, people are leaving and stuff, and law firms don't like when people are leaving. It hurts the reputation, the morale and the sort of instability that if you have instability, that's going to signal, people aren't going to like it. And people want people that are stable and unlikely to leave. If I see a resume and someone's been at their existing firm for like 6 years, then people will like that person compared to other people. If you're stable, it means you're doing a good job, it means that people like you, it means you're getting work. And so stability, law firms need stability. It's just, you would too. I mean, if you go on a date with someone, they've been married 6 times in 10 years, like you're going to be scared. Why would you marry someone or have a relationship with someone where they've been in 6 divorces in 10 years? You would think that there was something wrong with them. That's how law firms think too. It's important. The more stable you look, the more likely you are to get offers. And law firms want to hire people that are stable, and you would too. You certainly can. One of the most interesting things about attorneys when they move firms is attorneys will often relocate home. So maybe they're working in, I don't know, Cleveland, and they're from, I don't know, Spokane, Washington. And when people move like that, like law firms are all over it. Like they like people that are trying to move home because they figure like this person's from here, they're likely to settle down, they're going to stay long term. And it's so much easier for people to get a job. I mean, believe it, when they're employed somewhere and they want to move home because people think they're going to be stable. And it's very interesting. If you're moving firms within a city, there's going to be questions about, are you moving in your existing market because your performance isn't good, or you're not getting along with people, or you're not doing good work, and people don't know. But the other thing that law firms like that shows stability is if you're trying to move to a better firm than the one you're at. So law firms presume that people that are trying to move to better firms are going to be more stable. They're finding a better tribe to work with that's going to allow them to do the type of work they want. So when I make placements, the placements like that I try to make, and the way I try to position my candidates is like, this firm is exactly what they need. They've been looking for this. It's going to give them the exposure and the type of work, and it's where they've wanted to be their whole career and so forth. And so if you're moving up in terms of the prestige level of the firm you're at, that's actually viewed much more positively than if you're trying to maybe move down in terms of the stability a lot of times. And so, law firms will often hire people, from giant firms into smaller places. And when the attorney does that, when a law firm does that, a lot of time these attorneys will leave, and they'll get jobs in these firms during recessions and things, and then they'll leave. And so law firms often won't like that. So sometimes if you have really good qualifications in a really big firm and so forth, you want to move to a smaller firm for whatever reason, the firm's going to be very suspicious of you. And the fewer jobs you've had, the more stability. So fewer moves do signal, the ability to be loyal and commit. If you are looking for, if you're a new attorney and you want to move after a year, that's probably not a good thing. You should try to stick it out as long as it makes sense, and hopefully 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if you do that, the market's going to be much more receptive to you. It's just how it works. If you've been at your current firm for 3 years, you're going to be more attractive to a firm than if you leave after 1 year. If you move to a firm after 1 year and then you go to another firm and you're 2 years there and you try to move your second year, it's going to be very difficult because people are going to assume that you're going to leave. And, you need to, look like someone that's committed. So law firms like it when people buy homes because that means they have to pay a mortgage. Law firms like it when you have a family because that means that you have to support them and you're more likely to be stable. Law firms like it when people are very kind of connected in the community and part of groups and churches and all those things because it just looks like they're committed to something. And so people want people that are rooted and reliable, and they like that. Again, home, marriage, children, all these sorts of things will connote stability. Law firms like it when you're the breadwinner. So if you're a man, you have a wife and kids at home, they like that. If you're a woman and you have a husband and kids at home, they like that too. Because if you need income, you're likely to be stable, you're likely to stick around, and people like hiring people that are going to be stable and have families. And you're more likely to get hired a lot of times if you're one-dimensional, meaning that's what your life is about, practicing law, as opposed to all these outside interests. They want your passion to primarily be your job, which people don't like. But if you have all of these outside interests, a lot of times, there's nothing wrong with outside interest. It's typically how a lot of attorneys get business. I know one guy that liked surfing in El Salvador, or no, Nicaragua, I don't know what it was, but he got a lot of business doing that. But in general, people don't want attorneys with a lot of distractions. And so a lot of attorneys inside law firms are actually pretty boring sometimes, but they're stable. And so that's important. So anytime you go into an interview, by the way, and people do this all the time, I do like interview prep calls with my candidates every day. I do them and I love doing them. And it's usually I find the same things. But when I talk to people, they'll often, they'll come into the interview, they'll have all these doubts and things that they share with me, whether it's a compensation, whether it's, whatever it is, they'll always take a look at the firm and come up with these different doubts and things. And they'll doubts about working there. I mean, you have to go into an interview and look like this is exactly, what you want. And if you look like you want to do something else, or you're having doubts about the firm, or you're expressing any type of hesitancy when you're interviewing them, the law firm is going to hire someone that doesn't do that. And so that these, expressing any type of doubt is going to not get you a job. You have to go into an interview and you have to look like you're completely committed to it, like you have no doubts about the firm, and you're going to, you're going to want to work there. I saw the most interesting thing. This is a quick aside, and I don't want to tell too many stories here, but it's a very interesting one. I had this candidate she was at like Skadden Arps in New York City, and she was fairly senior, she's making like close to $400,000 a year. Her husband was a very good doctor, and he got a job in, I don't know, in some town like Martinsburg, West Virginia or something, leading this hospital. And it was very important for his career to take this job because he was going to have, I don't know, whatever his long-term goals were over there. So she was like, okay, I'll move with him to Martinsburg, West Virginia. And so I started setting her up with these interviews with law firms in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And I mean, these firms were paying like $80,000 to $100,000 a year. The work was not sophisticated compared to what she'd done, all these things. And she looked at the firms, and people had gone to like the University of West Virginia Law School or whatever, or Appalachian School of Law. And she went into each of these interviews, got every job. And even though these firms were completely beneath her in terms of her experience and all this stuff, she just blew everyone away and convinced them she wanted to work there, and got offers from every single firm. There was no doubts, and she wasn't feeling badly about working there. She just went in and just gave it her all. And then she did so well, like then we negotiated higher salaries and things, but she went in and just blew them away. And, most people in that situation would have doubts. If you quit a job without a job for whatever reason, That's not good. Attorneys are supposed to always be working as attorneys. Like, you need to think about this. Like, you cannot like walk away from the profession from any length of time and expect a law firm to hire you. If you quit, law firms will think you can't get along with a group, or maybe you weren't committed, or maybe you got fired. So you can't quit a job without having another one. As much as you may dislike your current firm, it's very, very dangerous because people will think that you're going to do the same thing there, or you have problems or whatever. It signals instability. And if you leave a job, it threatens, if you're going to do that, the law firm will think that maybe you're not manageable or whatever. And it shows on reliability. So there's people that quit jobs all the time. It doesn't mean your career is over, but if a law firm has a choice of hiring someone that's employed versus non-employed, if you're not employed, there's going to be questions about potentially your performance and your and whatever what they're not going to have if you're not quitting a job. Sometimes, if you have only law firm experience, that's going to be more marketable. So if a law firm makes a decision between hiring someone from a law firm to get one application for that and someone that's in-house or working for the government, they're going to hire the person usually that's from a law firm because that signals commitment to that practice setting. So attorneys go in-house all the time and try to go back to law firms, and it becomes, nearly impossible for them to get jobs at the same level of law firm that they could work at if they hadn't left. And so, if you leave a law firm and go in-house, the law firm's going to assume that you're not committed to that practice setting, which means working for all these different clients, being in a position where you might need to generate business, like working with a law firm group as opposed to something else. And so law firms want to hire people that are dedicated to firm life. And people think all the time that they leave a good law firm job and go in-house or do something else and that they're going to get hired again by law firms. And it just, it's very difficult because it connotes a lack of stability. And if you have that lack of stability, people want that. So the group wants people that are likely to stay. The next thing that's important, and this is something that every law firm looks for, and you might you might have to interview with a lot of law firms to find one that matches your personality and so forth and your fit. And it's very important that you go into a culture that's similar to you, that where the people think the same, where the people even maybe dress the same, or they talk the same, and or whatever. I mean, different people. There are different people. There are law firms that are composed of all Democrats, pretty much, or all Republicans. There are law firms. I couldn't believe it. I was working at this branch office of this Dewey Ballantyne firm, and there were maybe 12 partners there, and they were all Catholic. How does that happen? Like, so maybe they would talk about church and things and Catholic schools for their kids, and so people will come together based on different personalities and interests. There are law firms. There was one guy I was working for that had been an NFL player, and he was working at a firm that had all people that had been college athletes and that sort of thing. So people will gravitate towards groups that are like them. One of the most horrible firms that scared the hell out of me. I went to interview with this firm, and I walked in, and I was all enthusiastic, and said, "Hey, I'm here for the interview," to the receptionist, and then the receptionist like whispered back, and then I realized that the other attorneys that were talking in the halls were all whispering, and then I was sitting there, and I didn't hear any noise, and all I could hear were the air conditioning vents, and I was very uncomfortable. These people were just that's what they were like. They were just all very quiet and whispering. I just couldn't believe it. It was, and the offices were just sterile, and this is how it was. And so every law firm is like a tribe, and tribes will attract certain types of people. It's always been like that. The cavemen have similar customs. Religions have similar customs. And some, you have Muslims, you have Jews fighting, all these different types of groups. And so law firms will function best when the attorneys are similar and work together. I interviewed once with a law firm in Los Angeles. It's no longer around, but it was a small branch office of this really good firm called Heller Ehrman that went out of business. But I was interviewing this office, and I got in there. All the men were dressed in like just a way that I'm from Michigan. I'd never seen people dressed. They were wearing like tight T-shirts. They had like cigarettes on their desks, like whatever American Spirit, like these special. They were all smoking something similar to that. They were, one guy was wearing leather pants, other guys were wearing tight jeans and stuff. And they were actually, the associates were all gay. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But this literally was the type of tribe it was. I have another friend that was working at a really good law firm in Los Angeles, like a mid-sized firm, a very well-respected firm. And everybody there was Jewish. And he said, they interviewed, he was my friend, and they'd interviewed one of my candidates. And he said, he wouldn't fit in. I mean, we're all just kind of Jewish and share this culture and things. And so they didn't like that person. So, I mean, they didn't want to bring that person in. Now, you may think that's wrong, but I'm sure there's firms that don't, want to bring another person from other groups. So law firms, their feel and stuff becomes part of their culture and identity and the way the people are there. And they just sometimes, you can have different religions and things in there, but law firms will often hire very similar types of people. They will have people that act a certain way and do things, mannerisms. Some people will drink a lot, use drugs. I mean, it just doesn't matter. But these sorts of personalities are just there. The people come together usually based on the type of people, and often those people, the brand of the firm, the brand may be just brand, the people will be similar, and they'll just act a certain way. New York firms, many of them have very predictable and cultures. White and Case is an interesting firm that has a very unique culture, even though it's a very large firm. And law firms just have cultures, and so law firms, you want to fit in with a group of people that are like you, and if you do that, you're going to be happier. Like if you're surrounded by people that share your interests, your religion, your sexual orientation, your sex, whatever it is, you're going to like that. And people will interview with firms that are all women, just love it. And they want to, that's what they want. And so law firms will hire people based on cultures. You will feel comfortable in different firms based on cultures. And so you should find a firm that matches your culture. Firms in Los Angeles have often different cultures than firms in New York. Firms in Chicago have different cultures than firms in both those cities. Firms in Mississippi have different cultures than firms in Minneapolis. I mean, there's just different cultures in different parts of the country, and different groups have different cultures. And so you should find a place that matches your personality and fit. I once interviewed with this firm like in Michigan. It was just the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was called Hahnemann Miller, which is an awesome firm. I would say it's probably the best firm, local firm in Detroit. There's very, very good attorneys. I was interviewing these people, and at the same time, I was interviewing firms in New York, and these guys and stuff at this Hahnemann Miller were acting like, New York attorneys, but like even more exaggerated, like just very, very New York. And it was in Detroit, and that was their culture, and people fit in based on that. Your trust level is also important. So groups want to hire people that are trustworthy and that they can trust. And no tribe is going to bring in people that they don't trust. Think about the cavemen. If they bring in someone from outside, they're going to be suspicious of that person joining their group, and they may not trust them. And so if there's people within the group that aren't trustworthy, the entire group is at risk. And if one member works against the group's interest, stability collapses. There was a interesting thing that happened. There's a big New York firm, and very, very prestigious, like one of the top 5 firms probably in New York. And there was someone that went on above the law and was posting like all this awful stuff or negative stuff about the firm. And it was obvious that the person was inside the firm posting these things. And the law firm was very upset about it. And they just went into all the logs of whoever was logged in and doing things on the, about the firm during a certain period of time. And I don't know, they had a way of maybe recording screens or something. I don't know what happened, but they found that person, and they just like blew them out of they just got rid of them very, very quickly. It was a, person that probably otherwise might have had a career there, but they were against the firm. People that look untrustworthy. If they talk negative about their colleagues, they may be untrustworthy. They just want people that seem trustworthy. They will hire people from the same community more often, or the same, they'll trust people from the same religious and social backgrounds are more likely to be hired. And people from similar schools they may trust. And they, when they ask for references, I mean, essentially what they're doing is they're calling these people. They'll ask them about your performance and stuff often, but can they trust you? And groups want to have people that they trust and not trust. So are you trustworthy? Are you someone that is going to talk negatively about the firm, look trustworthy or not? And so law firms will try to hire people that are similar to them because of that trust. And firms want to feel safe that the people there are, trustworthy, and they want to feel confident. And so without trust, that's important, do you look trustworthy? How does trustworthy come across in interviews? So obviously, like if you talk negatively about your firm in an interview, like where you're coming from, then the law firm's going to presume that you're going to do the same thing with them. And It's interesting too. A lot of times it's very common when an attorney goes in-house, like attorneys a lot of times, like even from the best firms, it's very common. Like it happens a lot. Like I would say it happens to a significant percentage, like probably over 20 to 25% of attorneys that go in-house. So when you're working in-house a lot of times as an attorney, like the CEO's coming to you or whatever, and they're saying, we need to do this. Like this is what we need to do to, we need to do something in order to drive our stock price up or to cut corners in this transaction and get a better result. And so they will always like they'll bring in attorneys, and the attorney will be like, some attorneys will do what the CEO wants or what the company needs for its best interest. And they will make things happen and they will bend the rules in ways that might be, you know, not technically like something you would get disbarred for, but something that might be, you could argue would be unethical or something, or that would expose the company to potential liability. And the general counsel will want to do something. And there are people that are, I mean, the CEO, and there are people that will come in and do and get the results the company wants, and they will be trustworthy. There are some people, a lot of attorneys will go in-house and they will be asked to do something like that. And instead of figuring out how to do it, they will write these long memos and cover their ass and stuff and say that we can't do it. And those people get fired. They lose their jobs because people want people around them they trust. And so that's one of the, big things with law firms. Like they need people that they trust, with anything. If you see someone in your firm overbilling or writing down hours that aren't accurate and you bring it to everyone's attention, they won't trust you. I mean, even though that may be unethical. Age can discriminate against you. So law firms will always look at your age. They want people that are hungry, that have, if you don't have any business, you're typically, 1 to 5 years of experience is what they're looking for. They want people that have a lot of energy and that are likely to just be very enthusiastic. If you don't have enough, if you have too much experience but no business, then that means you're probably not going to be able to contribute in the way that a law firm wants. You're going to be often older attorneys are less trustworthy because they're angry that they're not partners. They're less impressionable, meaning they won't do things in a new way. They're less likely to follow orders. So law firm hires a 50-year-old attorney and a 30-year-old partner is giving them orders. They're going to be resentful often. So farms just don't like that. They want people that will follow, do what they want, that have potential to generate business, that have a lot of enthusiasm, that are willing to work, longer hours. And they're often very suspicious of older attorneys. Sometimes they'll hire an older attorney and have to get rid of them or whatever. And they're worried about getting sued for age discrimination. And so, younger people are viewed as having more stamina. And if you're a caveman, it means better, hunt more, you'll whatever. And so older people, contributed less. And so, just how it works. And so unless you have business when you get older, it can hurt you. And this whole invisible hand stuff means that, if you're likely to be hungrier, more energetic. And so law firms want to hire people that have the most, contribute the most. I think this self-interest one is very interesting because I know a lot of very successful attorneys, and they will do things like, the litigator that's doing a document review or something will sit there and they'll be listening to, motivational books on tape to grow while they're doing it. And the best attorneys are always, trying to get better. They're trying to learn how to do their jobs better. They're trying to, accumulate different types of experience and grow. And so that's what law firms want. They want people that are trying to get better in their practice here and do really well. I had this candidate I was talking to yesterday, and she's a rare candidate that actually she went to University of Chicago Law School, and she's working for a small firm, and she's doing like real estate and trust and estates and a little litigation. And for however I did it, I found a firm in this small market she's in Texas that needed a generalist, but she's like in her mid 50s and trying to get, I don't know, some state bar certification and trust and estates law and just continually growing. And this law firm needs someone to do trust and estates primarily, and she's growing and she looks like a better candidate than others because she's just growing. And so, sometimes, self-improvement could be moving from, a small regional firm to a major national firm, to continually trying to get more business, to get more experience in your practice here, just improving. And you should always be improving. You should never be the same attorney you were a year ago. You should be a better attorney that's improved. You should have a better, outlook and things and improving, and you need to be improving. So law firms will hire people that are trying to improve, and your ability to improve comes across in your resume. It's just the things that you do and the experience, getting better and better experience. I mean, it's very appealing, and and people that move from a law firm, by the way, a major law firm that has an opening may have someone that is a fifth year at a big law firm, and then someone that's a fifth year, maybe a middle market law firm. But they see this person in the middle market law firm, even though the person may not have gone to the best law schools, like they're just really improving. Like you can tell they're really excited. They're writing papers, they're giving presentations, they're doing all these sorts of things, and they look very, very good on paper compared to someone that's just kind of coasting. And so law firms like people that are trying to improve, and you would too. So a lot of attorneys aren't. A lot of attorneys just think they're doing a job and not something that where they need to, continually improve. And so these are all, things that are, attractive to firms and continually growing and trying to get into better firms and so forth. So if you're striving to improve, that looks very, very good. That's something that's exciting. And you would want to hire someone that's trying to improve as well. So the final one is just connections. Like these are important. The more relationships you can develop in the community, the more relationships you have with other people, the more connections you have. That's important. You should always be trying to develop connections. John Quinn, the founder of Quinn Emanuel, which is a very prestigious 1,000 attorney firm, he was giving a presentation once when I was a young associate there about how to generate business. And he said, like, even though this is a guy that at that point probably had a $50 million book of business, this is 20 plus years ago. He said the biggest mistake he ever made was, not networking well with people at Harvard Law School and building better relationships. Because if he'd done that, he would have a much larger book of business. So connections are important. Connections can generate business. Connections can give you respect. So all these sorts of things, are important. Law firms will often. I know one partner at a law firm, a big law firm. I think it's Boyce Schiller, but he said like when he's interviewing people, like he will always like look at their LinkedIn connections. So if someone has a lot more connections than someone that doesn't, he thinks that's a very valuable thing. And so if someone doesn't have a real strong LinkedIn presence, he won't hire them. So, law firms, when you have a lot of connections, that shows that you probably have access to business. It shows that people respect you, and it shows, something that's going to help you succeed in the long run. So, law firms want, like, there's all these coaches out there and resume people that do all these different things, but all these theories don't really matter. You just need to think about your ability to work in a law firm, your ability to stay there as just business motivated. Like everything is about, how you're going to advance the firm, and you have to be motivated, you have to be qualified, and all these market forces are going to decide who wins, because law firms ultimately are businesses and things work based on what benefits a business. And these market forces really decide the winners. And just one final point that I'm going to make, because I think it, is important. People when they're looking for jobs will often just apply to some open positions and things like that. But what they don't understand is like every law firm is a business. So if someone comes along, regardless of an opening, that business thinks they can benefit from, whether it's your background or just your experience in a practice area and they need someone, the law firm will make a business decision and hire you. So everything in a law firm, in terms of who they hire, law firms mostly bill by the hour. They have contingency cases, whatever can benefit their business is how they think about things. And so you have to find someone that will benefit your business. So we'll take like a quick break for like 1 or 2 minutes. And then when I come back, I will answer questions. Again, you can ask questions about anything that I've talked about today. It doesn't need to be this. You can talk anything, and I will stay as long as needed to answer questions. And I would really encourage you, if there's anything that you're thinking about in your career or just really want to know about, if you ask them, then I will answer the questions. So I'll be back in just 1 minute. All right, so we'll get started. Yeah, and one thing I would say about questions too is I think questions are one of the, in my opinion, they're one of the probably the most important part of the webinar, because there's a lot of things that may be covered that that I don't know that you may not quite understand. You can ask questions about, or just questions about your career, and I can kind of point you hopefully. just in the right direction. Answers to this.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Nope, that's not the right screen. 12. All right, we got some questions. In this particular webinar too, I think, I think it's, the topic itself, I think was extremely important. I think that most people, when they go into, any employment environment, and they're working in law firms, don't understand these things, and it ends up hurting them. And I think the people, it literally can change the entire course of your career if you don't think about these things in the right way. So I would commend everyone for being on this. It's a lot of stuff to learn, but it's very helpful. Okay, let's see here. Questions. Answer that. So first question: how do I start my own firm as a solo practitioner with limited resources? So you have to think about the market as, the market is you have to do what people will pay for. So what are people going to pay for? So people will pay for people that do trust in estates. They'll pay people to help them with residential real estate transactions. They'll pay people to help them with whatever. You can, whatever your, passion is or whatever you do, you can start your own law firm. There's some type of law firms that are very easy for solo practitioners to start. Like Trust and Estates is one of them. You can, it's not that hard to get clients as a trust and estates attorney. And there are courses and things online that will teach you how to operate your own trust and estates firm. There are portals that you can go to where if you want to be a personal injury attorney, you can get referrals from people. They'll say, hey, we have this auto accident, just pay us 30% of whatever you collect. There's just all these ways you can find work as a solo practitioner. Solo practitioners, where do you put your practice? So you could move to a market that's very, very small where there's not a lot of attorneys, you're the only attorney there. If you want to do something, like, you can always figure out how to get it done. So I think solo practitioners can do very well. You can do very well in all these practice areas. Like, you can get clients, you can do family law, you can do trust in estates, you can be a general practitioner and move to a smaller market. There's all these different things you can do. You could be some sort of specialty. I know a woman, I think it's absolutely fascinating. She was working at an IP firm, and she'd moved there from Atlanta. She wasn't doing IP. She was doing just some sort of support or something. I don't remember what it was. She was an associate, and she worked there for 5 or 6 years, and the firm went out of business, and she became an expert in doing software as services contracts that I don't even know much about. And she was able to build a really big practice doing that. When I left my last law firm, I initially was going to start my own practice, and then the head of that office came in and was like, I gave notice like on a Monday, and my last day at the firm was going to be like on a Thursday. And I figured I would have no issues starting my own practice because I had my own business already, and I could make more money with that than I could have made working in the law firm. And I just thought that was a good career decision. He said, if you're not happy here, it's going to be difficult if you leave for you to find a job in another good firm. So what I would recommend you do is take the next 3 months and talk to firms and just go to work somewhere else. And, and instead of doing that, well, I thought I could start my own practice. And so in addition to having all this work that I had, I also had put an ad out, and I was living in this city called San Marino, California, which is kind of like a offshoot of Pasadena. And I put an ad, and back then this is how people got work, in the Yellow Pages, which is used to be the printed thing that went out, and you could list your business in there. And I put an ad in the Yellow Pages, and I got all this work. I got truck driving. I got the dean of Pepperdine came to me for a divorce. I got all this work. So you can always find work as a solo. And but the people that tend to do the best solos are people that have whatever one type of thing. They do personal injury. They do trust in the estates. They do family law. There's a guy in Malibu. It's the most incredible thing. He graduated from Loyola Law School, or immigration's another good one. He graduated from Loyola Law School and didn't have a job. So he decided he was going to start a trust in the estates practice in Malibu. And so I was looking at some office space in Malibu, and I knew the woman that owned the office space. And there used to be a Malibu courthouse. And so the offices I were looking at were in the Malibu courthouse. And one of the offices was this big office that was the actual courtroom. And this guy had this big office in there. And she said, yeah, this guy's incredible. Like he graduated from law school like 4 or 5 years ago. And, he's already purchased, a $5 million house. And, it just, you can do all these things. I know one woman that graduated from Southwestern Law School at night and never had a job and started an immigration firm. And now she's one of the top immigration firm, attorneys in the United States. So you can figure out how to get work if you want to do something. Generally, working in a smaller market with fewer attorneys is going to be a good thing. We get calls like at least like once a year from attorneys like in these kind of weird markets. It could be like a desert town, like there's all these towns that are like in the desert and all over California. You get these calls from people like solo practitioners in desert towns, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm an attorney, and there's only one other attorney than 60 miles of me, and I need someone to take over my practice, and just I need another attorney." So there's all these places you can work in small markets and and specialize in different things. And people, you can get work. If you're a family law attorney, people are getting divorced all the time. I mean, half of all couples get divorced. I mean, you set out a shingle doing that, and you can get work. And you may need some money to live on. So you may, when I started my own practice, I never did it because when I was told to talk to recruiters and look for a job, I couldn't believe how much I was interested in this job. But you can specialize in things, and you can, anybody can get business. You can build a website. You can, get cases from other attorneys. I mean, whatever you want to do, you can do if you're driven enough. And it's a good question because a lot of people don't understand this sort of stuff. So, the next question is, can law school grades determine whether or not I'll be hired by a top firm? Yes, of course. So, but the only reason your law school grades really matter, I have, BCG has thousands of candidates from working here. In almost all instances, law firms do not ask for law school grades. They don't care. Top law firms always do, but smaller firms and stuff don't. Middle market firms and even large law firms, after you have a certain amount of experience, don't really care. Law school grades have nothing to do with your specialization or practice area, the type of firm you're at. The only time law school grades matter is the biggest time they matter is when you're graduating from law school. And the reason they matter when you're graduating from law school, you're in law school, is they have nothing to compare you to. The only thing they can compare you to are other law students at other law schools. So if you have top grades, if you're in the top 5% of your class at a good, whatever law school, law firms will hire you more than if someone that's in the bottom half. That's what you would do. That's the only way law firms can, figure out like who you are or, what your experience is and all that. I mean, that's the only way they can distinguish you from other law school graduates. So they can distinguish you based on the quality of your law school and your law school grades. But after that, when you get out, all these other things are important. Quality of firm you end up in, your experience and all that sort of thing. And you can get hired in a top law firm later in your career, even if you didn't get good grades, if you get the kind of experience that a law firm wants. So one example I like to give, so say you're in, St. Paul. Oh no, that's not a good one. Say you're in a good market. I can just give you an example for Orlando, Florida. So you're in Orlando, and you graduate from law school and you do real estate, right? You do real estate, and you're a first year associate. And in Orlando, there might be 50, or let's say 40 first years doing real estate in a law. So, after 3 years, it's going to be, maybe 20 or 25. And after 6 years, it might be 10 or whatever, because people leave. And if a law firm has an opening for a 6 year, they might only get, there's 10 people, they might get, 1 to 2, they might only get one applicant for that. It's a 6 year. So, so the longer you're in your practice area in a market, the fewer people that you're going to be competing with. And, grades at this point, are not that important, your experiences. So your grades are really only important when you get out of law school, because when you get out of law school, there's, 30,000 people each year. There's maybe, 4,000 at, top 10 law schools, whatever it is, 4,000 top 10. And then, and then out of those 4,000, there's going to be, 300 that are at the top of their class or whatever it is. So but you're top of class. So well, that's 1%, so they're, they can just, that's how they, talk to law school. That's how the law firms can, distinguish between different people. So, but when you're out for a while, that is much less important. It doesn't really matter. You just think about it from a law firm's perspective. So there's 30,000, out of those 30,000, there's gonna be, if there's 300 law schools, there's gonna be, or let's see, there's gonna be, 1,000 that are top of the class at all law schools. I mean, this is how they distinguish between people. And so they will hire the people that look best on paper. What are the best ways for attorneys to handle difficult law firm partners? So you don't work for them. That's impossible. So you don't work for them. So you just avoid them and you try to work for people that aren't that difficult. If you can't do that, then you give them what they want. So you go overboard and try to give them everything they want. There are partners in law firms where if you work for them, they will always eat up associates and people will leave or have a bad experience. And so if you are working for them, you just need to give them, what they want to the maximum extent possible. Just be, very, and people that are being mean and stuff, they know they're being mean. I mean, they're giving you a hard time, but they may be being mean because you're not doing the work, the quality they expected, even though it's impossible for you to do because you don't have experience. But you just need to do whatever you can to give them what they want. The best solution to any of this is just to avoid working for them. So try to get working with other people. And if you can't do that, and the person is absolutely impossible to work with, then you might want to look for another job. But in most cases, anybody that's really difficult to work with, they need people to work for them. So if people won't work for them, then they need to change. And but there are people out there that are just impossible to work for. And so, you need to try to avoid them, or you need to give them what they want. And if you give them what they want, you figure out what they want, you can hopefully do well. The next question: what are the career benefits of pro bono work for attorneys at different stages of their careers? So pro bono is very dangerous. Some law firms will require people to do a certain amount of pro bono. Other law firms will make it optional. I think pro bono is very dangerous. So people think that pro bono is very important, but in reality, when you're in a law firm, at least the first 5 or 6 years, well, anytime you're in a law firm, the law firm wants you to have all your efforts and stuff geared towards them. And they want you to, they think that they are giving you better experience, whether it's, working on their transactions or litigation. So they, prefer people that are more dedicated to having pro bono, to doing, work for the law firm than doing pro bono. If I have a candidate's resume and one lists a bunch of pro bono stuff and the other doesn't, the person without the pro bono is more likely to get a job. Now, there are big firms that require pro bono, or, but in general, when you're working for a law firm, they want all of your efforts to go to them. I have a quick story. It's not a great story, but I was a summer associate at a big New York law firm, and they had a meeting for all the summer associates to talk about pro bono. And this guy got up that was heading the pro bono program as an associate, and he started talking about how the law firm had like the lowest pro bono of any firm in the city, and in front of the summer associates. And the guy literally got fired within a month. I mean, he was just gone. And he'd been there for a while, like 5 or 6 years. So I think pro bono is very dangerous. Certainly you can get good experience. You think you're doing something positive and so forth. But most law firms want people that are very dedicated. Now, there are partners in law firms that will be working on pro bono cases that are important and so forth and have a big societal impact, and they will ask other attorneys to work on it. And getting close to that important partner doing the pro bono work is a good thing for you. But in general, you want to avoid pro bono. I had a guy that went to Columbia Law School and was unemployed. And on his resume, I'll never forget it, he wasn't getting any interviews. And everyone he was just, even though he's the top of his class, or one of the top third of his class at Columbia Law School, wasn't getting any interviews. And the first paragraph of his resume contained like 5 or 6 lines about all this pro bono work he'd done, and then had another like 1 line or something, said worked on M&A transactions or something. And people, they want people whose efforts are dedicated towards the law firm and not necessarily outside. Now, you can get, when I was at Quinn Emanuel, they had this thing where you could go try drunk driving cases and stuff in the Pasadena District Attorney's Office, and people would do that and they would get good experience, but it never, it doesn't mean that your hours are really, I'm sorry, not your hours, it does, that you don't have to work as many hours.
Okay, this is a good question. So
It's interesting that you really don't talk much about hours. If my firm had a 1,900 hours bill requirement, for a law requirement, how much should I be billing? How many hours should I be putting for business development? There's not a lot of transparency in my firm, which is why I'm asking this question. So one of the most successful attorneys in Los Angeles, a guy that's got just a massive, massive book of business. He, early in his career, he said, I will bill, I'll make sure I make my firm's bill hour minimum, which is like 2,000 hours or 1,900, whatever it is. And I'm gonna put in the same amount of time developing connections in business. So he would, start his day at 7 or whatever and bill all his hours by 4 and then go out and travel around Los Angeles, meeting with different companies and talking to them, not even trying to get business, just offering them advice and stuff. And he developed this massive book of business, like whatever it is. And, he makes like $8 or $9 million a year now. I think it's a $50 million book of business, and just, he put in an equal amount of time to developing business. And I'm not saying that you need to do that, but every attorney that I know at every firm that has business, like, they prioritize, as well as billing hours, they prioritize networking and trying to get business and all that sort of stuff. So you should be doing that. You need to put, if you want to have a long-term success in the profession and make millions of dollars, which anybody can, you need to, or less, but you need to have a certain amount of time dedicated to developing business. You may say, well, what do I need to do and so forth? You can read about it, you can figure it out, but you need to get out there and do what you can to meet with people and to get business. This is what every successful attorney does. So you can bill your 2,000 hours a year and go home at night and watch TV and Netflix, or you can, use that time to try to develop business. Yes, your family relationships and things will suffer, but it will also benefit your career. So this is just what people do that develop large books of business. They get out there and they meet people. Okay, yeah, and these are good questions. So I would encourage, if you have questions or anything that you're thinking about, I'm happy to answer it because it can help you and other people as well. And sometimes the answers to these questions will just completely change the direction of your career. What if some of the companies on my resume are unrecognizable because other companies belong to foreign governments who asked me to help decide laws for companies in foreign countries like South America, Europe, and Africa? Well, if you're trying to get a job in the United States, and first of all, law firms hire people coming from law firms. It's very rare that they hire people not coming from law firms. Law firms hire people with US experience, not foreign experience, unless it somehow just meets their needs in a way that's impossible to be otherwise. But it's very difficult if you're a foreign attorney to hire a US law firm to hire you. If your experience is in-house, it would be difficult for you, even if you went to your top of your class at Harvard Law School and were working at a company, it would be very difficult for you to get a job in a law firm. But if you're working for a foreign company that no one knows, and they don't know the quality of your experience, it doesn't sound like it's related to practicing law in the US, there's no way the law firm can evaluate the quality of your experience or the quality of attorneys you work with or the sophistication of your transactions working for a foreign company. It's very, very difficult. So, just think about it in this perspective. So if you were a US attorney and all your experience was working for a US law firm, and you decided you wanted to get a job in Africa, that's going to be next to impossible. Why would an African law firm hire you? And if your experience was in a company in the United States, then you wanted to work in a law firm in Africa, why would a law firm in Africa hire you? It doesn't make any sense. So you really have to think about, if you're trying to work in the US or you're coming from another practice setting, you need to think about how would it work if a US attorney was trying to do the same thing. And just getting an LLM, by the way, like a lot of people think they can get an LLM and succeed in the United States and get jobs. Yes, some people do get jobs from foreign countries in law firms in the United States. That anybody can, if you try to work at the heart of the firm is for the firm to hire people, meaning it's in geographic locations that no one wants to work in, where you're more likely to get hired, but it's not something that will help people get hired in New York City or something, because you're competing with people that have US JDs, and the US JD enables a law firm to evaluate you based on the quality of law school you went to, how well you did, where's your grades in an LLM program, or the quality of schools. People can, LLMs will
it's not impossible to get into LLM programs. It's much easier than it would be to get into a top law school where you have to CalStat and all this kind of stuff. The next question. How do I bring bigger clients into my law firm? I'm in a mid-sized law firm and the success bringing in smaller clients, but I want to bring in larger clients. Well, you can bring in larger clients in a lot of ways. You know, if you're working on, I don't know what kind of work you're doing, if you're doing litigation or transactional work, but people in mid-sized firms will often be able to bring in larger clients in a lot of different ways. So first of all, if you have experience in whatever type of work that the larger client needs, that's something, if you're a larger client and you have that experience, would be interesting to them. If you're able to bring in smaller clients and you want to bring in, you know, larger clients, you need to have something that appeals to those larger clients. So usually what people at middle market firms do to appeal to larger clients is they do all the things you did to get your smaller clients, whether it was networking or whatever you did to get those smaller clients, do the same thing, but they offer better billing rates. So, you know, larger clients, if you can bill lower billing rates, will be interested in you than if they have to pay higher billing rates to larger firms. So that's interesting. And law firms will like that. But one thing to understand too with larger clients, and this is something I don't like to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. You know, larger clients are very aware of the brand of the firm that they use. So a law firm, a company is very excited to say we're represented by Gibson Dunn or we're represented by Melvin or something like that. That reflects the strength of the company. And so when they're negotiating against other sides or whatever, if that large firm is stepping in, that's a sign of strength, and that large companies like that brand. But it doesn't mean that you can't do work on behalf of larger clients. You have to just do it from a business standpoint. Like, are you able to save them money? Are you able to do the work more efficiently? Are you able to offer the same level of expertise or better in a niche? So maybe you have a niche that large law firms don't do. Sometimes large law firms that are conflicted out of certain types of work will give smaller to mid-sized firms the work because their billing rates are too high or whatever. So you can bring in, you know, larger clients. It's just, you know, how do you do it? One thing that's interesting is during recessions, you know, in the legal market, what often happens is the larger clients, maybe they don't have the money or they don't have the budget to pay for large law firms, so they'll often give work to middle market firms. There are firms like in upstate New York is very interesting, like in Rochester and Syracuse and things like that, that have lower billing rates. And a lot of times large companies, whether it's in New York City and that sort of thing, that give a lot of work to the bigger firms there, will also farm out a lot of work to, you know, really good firms and, you know, upstate New York, that just because they can do the work more efficiently. And many times there's some very good firms in upstate New York that have a lot of people in, you know, from big firms that just move there. They make less money, the hours are better and so forth, but they give them more. Okay, my doctorate in immunology, and I'm finding that most firms are looking for engineering backgrounds. Now I'm considering pivoting to another field of law. Do you have advice for someone looking for a position in another legal field? So this is crazy. So first of all, you're right. When you look at job openings, most of the job openings in patent law or whatever you're trying to do are for people that have electrical engineering backgrounds or physics and stuff, and to a lesser extent mechanical engineering. That's where the patent work is. In terms of doing life sciences work, you don't just have to work in a big firm. There are thousands, if not 10,000s of law firms that are small, that might have 3 to 5 people or 10 people all over the country, in Silicon Valley and all sorts of different markets. Boston's a big one, that need people with life sciences PhDs. And so there's fewer jobs for those people, but all you need to do is research and find all of the firms and that do, you know, life sciences patent work. There are some firms that it's just like one person. There are some firms where it could be 5 or 10 people. And some of these firms could be in, you know, Denver or whatever. So you just need to make sure that you find all of the places you possibly can and apply to them. And if you do that, you're going to get a job. But most people they do these searches that are incomplete. They don't research all the different places, you know, that could do that type of work. Sometimes there's firms where there's people have engineering backgrounds, and then they also do, you know, some life sciences work, but not as, I mean, you can find firms and people that do it. You just have to do a search. You should be searching in every large US city for law firms who do it and small law firms and applying to them. And you can find a job. And why would someone that spent, 10 years getting a doctorate in immunology do something else? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think that you need to pivot to another legal field. If you're a patent attorney, I mean, you just don't. If you want to be a patent attorney, there's so many small firms. They're everywhere. They're in Toledo, Ohio. They're in, they're just everywhere. So you need to find those people and apply. Most people looking for jobs don't really think through this stuff. They just they don't, they don't look at the whole market and all the different places they could apply. So what do? You just go into Google and you search for, let's just do an example here. I'm just going to Google here real quick, insurance channel screen, Google. So you just, say you're in Rochester, New York, I'm just giving you these things, life sciences, patent attorneys, Rochester. So you got Big Hill, got LA Hyde, got, let's see, science patent attorneys, you've got Bold Patents firm, you've got Morabato law offices. Let's see what's going on with these folks. They go sort of intellectual property law. Look, they do intellectual property law and personal injury and estate planning. I mean, this is just insane. So intellectual property. Experience intellectual property law, help you with creative ideas, patents and trademarks, design patents, utilities. So this guy does not do life sciences patent work, but there are going to be firms in Bold Patents law firm. Let's see. Industries, computer hardware, same thing. So again, you're going to run in nanotechnology, maybe that practice areas. Look at that, all these different things, patents, but you can research and find patent attorneys, hopefully, in every different and all these different cities. Harris Beach, like they do it. So it's kind of legal practice. So this is Rochester, New York. I'm looking at. So this is services, intellectual property strategy, intellectual property enforcement. Property strategy, so the idea would be you would apply to, this is just Rochester, and then you could do, and there's all these places where, you can potentially wave into these different states, so Cincinnati, and everybody should be doing this when you're looking for a job. So Frost Brown, both, what are these again, or it says Dinsmore Shoal, like Taft Law Firm, look at this, this Taft law firm does IP, life sciences litigation, pharmaceuticals. So these people would probably be interested in you to some extent. Another this firm emerging, but the idea would be you just go into every possible city you can and in the country, and you search for people that do that type of work. And if you do that, you'll get a job. You just have to basically send unsolicited applications, preferably to the attorneys that do that kind of work. And then if you do that, then you'll get a job. So you can get lots of jobs. You just have to apply to enough places. Then you have to have a compelling reason for them to hire you. You really want to do work or whatever, but you need to apply to firms all over the country. And a lot of times what's interesting about patent attorneys too, because it's, federal law, like if you're admitted to the US patent bar and stuff, like you can work remotely. Like there's all these attorneys in Florida I've seen that work remotely, the patent attorneys for firms in Texas and those sort of things. You just need to find the right people that do it. Okay, I read an article on BCG which mentioned that it may be all right to apply for jobs where you don't match the required years of experience. If they don't receive a post-grad offer of the 3L, it would be appropriate to apply to roles requiring 1 to 3 years of experience. So law firms that are hiring law students, it's different than law firms that are hiring experienced attorneys. So a law firm that's hiring experienced attorneys will generally expect you to have, that certain level of experience. So for example, there's a role with 1 to 3 years of experience. You could apply after 9 months, you could apply after 5 years or 6 years. Law firms will just hire the best person that comes along. So they're not always rigidly looking at your levels of experience. I had a woman yesterday that got an interview with a firm looking for 5 years of experience, and she had 25. So law firms, if they have the work and they think they can bill you out or whatever, and you're the best applicant, they will hire you. They're not, wedded to the years of experience. You're just wedded to the business idea that they need someone that can do, the type of work that you're doing. Apologies to that. Okay, what are the common red flags that might prevent you getting hired by a law firm after graduation? So the biggest thing that law firms are looking for when you're looking for a position after graduation, the law firms are typically they want you to have been worked somewhere in a law firm, hopefully like in the summer or something, even if you're like a volunteer or whatever. They want it's much easier to hire someone that has law firm experience that someone that doesn't, because it shows you're motivated to do that when you're in law school. And you could be at the bottom of your class from one of the lowest ranked law schools in the country. But if you have law firm experience and you show that you wanted to do that when you're in law school, like that's important. Law firms, in terms of looking at your background, they typically will shy away from people that have like a lot of entrepreneurial experience because they're likely to leave. That, but the biggest thing, someone that wants to get a job as a first year attorney out of law school, your resume basically needs to list your law school, whatever your college, and then any legal experience or the way legal experience you have, and then if you do some jobs prior to law school, you can list those. So there's nothing really that complex about getting a job when you're in law school. Is your resume it doesn't need to be that, just basically need to list your experience. Try to avoid entrepreneurial things, and then hopefully I've worked in a law firm. But a law firm hiring someone that's in law school is just, again, they're coming out of law school, is going to hire the person they think is going to be like the best fit for the law firm, and meet their business needs. So you may have to work, it just depends. You may work in workers' comp, or you may work in, whatever. Typically, you're going to be much better off trying to apply to firms. If you're from smaller market, like let's say you went to law school at University of Wisconsin, you're from Lansing, Michigan or something, you're gonna have a better odds usually getting hired in Lansing than you would, in other markets. But getting a job out of law school is there's not a lot of information that they have to evaluate you on. What do law firms look for in a summer associate that signals long-term potential? So if a law firm's looking to summer associate, all they really care about is your law school and how well you did there. And that's kind of it. And then maybe you were in a career prior to law school and had some stability there, but that's pretty much it. People that interview summer associate jobs, they want to see people that are just very enthusiastic about it, that want to work in a law firm a lot. And, but typically there's not a lot. Just think about it from the point of view of a law firm. They do not have a lot of information to evaluate you on as a summer associate, because the only thing they have to compare you against is other law students and how they did, and then your enthusiasm when you go to interviews. Give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah, and then just one other thing that I just want to answer from like what signals long-term potential. A lot of times people will have like experience prior to law school. Like they may have been in the healthcare industry and wanted to get a job as a healthcare attorney. They may have been an engineer and want to get a job as a patent attorney. So they also will look at like, how does your experience, line up with whatever our practice areas are, and if you've been like a healthcare, worked in the healthcare industry as a nurse for 10 years or something prior to law school, want to be working in healthcare. I mean, that's a signal that you're likely to stick around in that practice area. Firms hiring for that. I'm including these questions. Okay, how do I spot an associate who is ambitious and using your firm as a stepping stone? So you don't really know, but sometimes you'll interview someone and that person will be extremely motivated, but so much so that if that person, if you hire that person is likely to leave. So you can tell a lot of times. Sometimes, if your firm is not, the best firm out there or the top firm, and the person is trying to get a job at your firm because maybe the market's slow and it's the only job they can get, or maybe you have a sense that the person may ultimately want to go to a better firm, and I'll usually spot those. A lot of times there'll be recessions and things, and people won't be able to get jobs in large law firms, so they'll be looking at smaller law firms, or you can usually get a sense of it. The person's not going to stay, especially if they're coming from a better firm, so that these are things you can kind of spot, and and you just kind of get a sense of it. And people that are very ambitious, when you interview them, will often come across as someone that it's too ambitious to probably stick around for a firm your size. I mean, law firms can usually pick that up. No one likes it when someone that's very ambitious and has really good qualifications comes to a firm and then leaves. It just doesn't make the people there feel good about themselves. And so, there's just something you can usually spot pretty well. Like, could the person get a job at a better firm if the situations were different? And if they come to work for us, do they look like they're gonna leave? People generally need to have really solid reasons for wanting to work in, in a smaller firm or a mid-sized firm compared to where they're at. Sometimes people will say, I want to work here because I don't like these things about a large law firm, and I think that I can get more business here and have a better career. I mean, people need to give you pretty compelling reasons. And when I interview people, I can always tell, like, is that person someone that is not going to stick around, or there's going to be issues with? I can always tell, that they're overly ambitious and maybe they're only trying to do recruiting, for example, because the law firm market's slow, and you can usually spot people like that. How do you tell what a law firm needs? I'm interviewing with a British firm that reached out to me recently. Yeah, well, if a law firm reaches out to you, like with if it's unsolicited and someone contacts you, then I mean, whatever is in your background is what they need. So I would definitely interview them and understand what they need. British firms a lot of times will, come into the US, they'll want to develop capital markets practices and things, and they'll reach out to attorneys that have that background trying to hire them. So, if someone's interviewing you, they'll usually tell you what they're interviewing you for, and then you need to kind of evaluate that opportunity. So, I think this is the last question. Well, actually, no, this isn't the last question. But yeah, I only have more questions, I think, so we have another. Okay, Mr. Barnes, excellent. I had to edit this down. Sorry, choppy. Your marks under number 9, trust level in-house attorneys, something like a one side are attorneys who bend the rules, maybe even to the point of unethical behavior, and do the thing for the SEO wants, versus the other side attorneys who won't bend the rules or be unethical or write CYA memos and will resist the thing the CEO wants. Attorneys following under B get sacked. My thoughts, a group B giving better advice that better protects the legal risk of the company or agency in the long term. I'm in-house government. I face pressures when I fuck what the staff manager wants to do. On the other hand, many staff respect my higher quality advice. I'm so glad you're the attorney signing this mess in-house. One can't fire the client when it's to leave, as we did in Big Law, as it is. So if you have any advice from me, it'd be welcome. Yeah, so you can certainly write cover your ass memos and put them in the file. But the way to approach problems as an in-house attorney is to give the CEO like a solution to whatever they want, but then tell them the legal risk. Sometimes people that are in-house will basically just tell people the legal risk and won't tell them, what you could do, but these are the problems. So that's okay. I mean, in-house attorneys do need to, cover their ass. I was working with this attorney in the legal department of General Motors, and then there was some sort of like seatbelt thing that happened where seatbelts weren't functioning or something. But for whatever reason, that had come across prior to these seatbelts being manufactured, the desk of 3 or 4 in-house attorneys there, and they were all fired. And in that particular case, they didn't advise the company of all these risks and things, and just kind of took a pass at it. So you have to cover your ass, and you have to tell people what the risks are when you're in-house. But CEOs want people that will help them do things. Like they're under pressure because they need to make money. They need to keep people employed. They need to maintain the stock price or grow the stock price. So you have to be able to tell people how they can do what they want, and that's what you're hired for. But you can tell them the risks so they can evaluate the risk, but it's not your role to make decisions. If you tell them these are all the ethical problems and things, but this is how you do it, and then you don't judge them based on their whatever they do. You just help them get results. And if you don't do that, you will lose your job. And it's just, doesn't mean, they will respect you if you tell them you shouldn't do it, but this is how you can do it. But they don't want to feel like, you're going to get them fired or destroy their career by doing something they want to do. You need to protect confidences. So, CEOs will surround themselves from management that helps them get the results they need, because they have to keep people employed. They're judged based on the company's performance and so forth. It's a great question, because a lot of people make this mistake when they are working for in-house companies. It's the same thing with clients. I mean, clients will want to get a certain result, and you can tell them how to do it, the risk, but ultimately it's not your decisions. The CEO's decision or the client's decision. But it's a great question, because this stuff happens. these sort of issues come up all the time. And I would say a good percentage, like probably at least 25% of attorneys that go in-house, they go in-house and then they just are like, this is disgusting, like they can't do this. And then because they're not doing what the CEO and stuff wants, they end up losing their jobs. But just remember that the people that you're working for are, they're under a lot of pressure to get results. So you have to help them do that. And if they need to think that you're on their side, that you're not going to backstab them, that you're going to protect their confidence, that you're not going to talk negatively about them if they take a certain action. Okay, as a US-based attorney with the JD, what are your thoughts about rejecting an international company? Because I know they'll probably do the same thing that they tried to hire me for briefly, considering defending against the SEC and IRS, but there was a conflict of interest. Okay, let me just see. Okay, I'm not really sure what this question's about, but I'll try to answer it. If you want to answer a follow-up or ask a follow-up to clarify it, I'll answer it. So I don't know. They keep having people defend them against the SEC and the IRS, and then they fire attorneys. They probably fired the attorneys because that person doesn't tell them what they want to hear and try to get them the result that they want, and doesn't believe in whatever their case is. So, whoever this company is wants to hire an attorney that will believe in them and tell them how they can get the result that they want, instead of making them feel like they can't get the result that they want. And so you have to tell them all the possibilities and all the things you'll do instead of why it's not going to work. And a job of an attorney is to make the client feel like they've got their side and they're gonna do everything they can, instead of giving them a lot of doubts and stuff. You tell them the risk and you tell them what you can do. And then you say there's a conflict of interest. I'm not really sure what that's about, but there are companies that will hire attorneys just to conflict them out, but I'm not really sure what that means exactly. But I hope that answered your question. I have an LLM, 2 years of business immigration law experience, and 1 year as a civil law attorney in career alternatives or legal services. What are your suggestions of my career alternatives? Well, I think business immigration experience is great. I think that if you are able to do that with an LLM in the US, I think that immigration is a great practice area. There's a lot of demand for it. Immigration attorneys at all levels of experience are marketable. It's one of the most marketable practice areas. I'm not sure why you would not want to do it, and maybe you don't. And now you're working at legal services, which I'm assuming is related to litigation and so forth. You may enjoy litigation more, and litigation is a very dangerous practice area for a lot of people, but also not. The reason it's a good practice area is more than 50% of attorneys are litigators. So people are always suing each other. People that are sued and suing always need attorneys. So there is a lot of work for litigation attorneys, but in terms of specialty, 50% of attorneys are litigators. What is your specialty? Is it commercial litigation? Is it personal injury plaintiff's work, personal injury defense? Is it municipal litigation? There's so many different types of litigation. So, whatever you do, it's important to be specialized, because the more specialized you are, the more marketable you're going to be. If you were looking for an immigration attorney and you found someone that did litigation, real estate, and immigration, you would want the person whose experience is only in immigration. So my advice to anyone is to choose a practice area and specialize in it, because clients and law firms all want specialists. Yeah, let me see. In regard to the previous question, I don't know what they did with the previous attorneys. I don't think they knew about the IRS, SEC. I worked with them before, and international or ADR and contractual with them. So maybe they didn't fire the previous attorneys. Maybe the attorneys discovered that there were very serious problems and things that they did wrong with the IRS and SEC. I don't know. And they just thought from an ethical standpoint, they couldn't represent them. You can, attorney's job is to represent anybody. I was watching a Dateline NBC. I don't know, it's tournament TV. It's always, I guess it just runs constantly on this one channel. And TV defaults to it. But I was watching the funniest, they were talking about a trial, and the guy that was being charged with murder was like literally on tape talking to his friend, reporting, telling them how he murdered his girlfriend and how he disposed of the body and why he murdered her and where he murdered her and how he took her to dump her off a bridge and all this stuff. And the attorney was defending it, saying, "Oh, he's just making it up," and all this sort of things. And that the attorney's job is basically to whatever happens with their client, their job is to defend them to the best of their ability. So you can withdraw from a case because you don't like what someone's done with the IRS and SEC, but every person and every company is entitled to a defense. And, if you're defending them, I mean, that's your job. Let's see the questions on here. Yeah, this next question. There's no other questions. I think there's about it. I mean, there's a lot of questions that are very similar things I've already answered. So okay, what interview strategies can law firms to use to reveal whether an attorney is comfortable with their long-term culture and values? Well, I mean, people will often, cultural fit, when you're interviewing people, will often be pretty obvious. I mean, if the person seems like they'd be someone who fits in, and that, even political affiliations can come out in interviews when people, talk about certain things. Someone might say, "Oh, I'm so mad about what Trump's doing," or something. Anybody can kind of pick up on that, in an interview. But, in terms of your long-term culture and values, if you talk about your culture in an interview, then the person will either look very interested in it, not say anything, or be interested. So you can kind of understand that. I think that, most law firms, when you talk to people, I mean, you can fairly easily pick up on, the type of person they are and if they're comfortable with your culture and how they react to things you say and people there. All right, well, I think that's about it. Thanks everyone for being on the webinar. I thought this, I will say that this particular topic that I covered today could really change the direction of your career in life if you understand these things. Most people don't. So I would commend you for spending all the time on this. I think that, say every week when I do these webinars, people, I get, follow up for people that may have been on them like a year or two ago or 5 years ago, and it changed the whole direction of their career in life. So people that are out there learning, like you're watching this, maybe you're reading self-improvement books and doing other things, or maybe you're studying more about your practice here, getting credentials. I mean, learning about this stuff can really help you have a long-term career. And I hope I, at the beginning, told you some of the reasons that I think, law firms are a really good choice. So just trying to make the right decisions to stay in them is very important. So thanks everyone for being on the webinar. And well, it looks like my camera wasn't on. Sorry about that. And I will be back next week. Let me just make sure there's none. Yep, that's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.